Have you given any thought to contributing to the melt? It's easy to do. Just click the Patreon link in the episode notes, and for as little as $3 a month, you can get access to bonus episodes, early access to regular episodes, and you can also participate in monthly Zoom meetups. It helps to keep the magic happening here at the Melt. So I encourage you to karmically entangle yourself with the Melt today by subscribing monthly for less than the price of a container of goatee wax, or a prosthetic pinky, or a half stick of DMT butter, or an inflatable casket, or the shrunken head of an Atlantean supermodel, or a woolly mammoth's merkin, or a crystalline replica of Baba Yaga's hut, or a capsule of Sasquatch dander.
This is Hunter Muse.
And this is Chris Snipes, and you are listening
to The Melt.
According to the website ThoughtCo, natural law is, quote, a philosophy based on the idea that everyone in a given society shares the same idea of what constitutes right and wrong. Further, natural law assumes that all people want to live good and innocent lives. Thus, natural law can also be thought of as the basis of morality. Unlike laws enacted by governments to address specific needs or behaviors, natural law is universal, applying to everyone, everywhere in the same way. Well, this resonates with me. There's always been a substantial part of me that has felt that society and many of the laws that attempt to conduct its behavior seem to treat people as if they were children needing a mother or father figure to tell them what to do, how to do it, and what for. I even remember asking my mother one night as she was tucking me in just what the law was. I imagined it as a person, humorously enough, a grumpy person who wanted to control everyone's behavior. The argument could be made that many people are too immature or lack the responsibility to govern themselves, but I would argue that perhaps it was the nanny state that produced such people in the first place. Anyway, all of this natural law stuff is new to me, and I have been curious to find out more, so Rose 777 pointed me in the direction of Brandon Sibley, and I am grateful for the guidance. Brandon wields a vast array of knowledge on the subject and has gotten to a place where he embodies it. I start off the conversation by asking Brandon where one should start when trying to comprehend natural law.
Where I would always start is a foundation, right? So you have to have foundation principles that you, an immovable, what would in the Bible be described as an immovable rock, foundation on which you will not shift from. And what these are is invisible principles, okay? And these invisible principles set about all law, like you were asking earlier about natural law, right? There's no reason to write it because we understand it. It should be common knowledge in our consciousness that it's just like the child who goes and does something bad. They instinctively know that they've done something bad. That's why they try to hide it, okay? They try to hide from the wrong act. So we talk about fortitude, justice, prudence, and temperance, right? And with mind and speech, man, I think this is the corpus hermeticum, if I remember correctly, but with mind and speech, man alone and only man can use those two tools to ascend towards the immortals. And what that means is to the place of higher consciousness. Okay? So when you start living your life based on these principles that I discuss all the time on my show and on other live streams, if you go back to that rock solid foundation in which you won't move from, then you'll base everything that you go looking for off these principles. And we'll start with something so simple as the Bill of Rights that most people have never read, right? We hold these truths to be self-evident. The self-evidence, if you don't have proper reading comprehension, what we'll talk about is equality, okay? So I am my brother's keeper in a sense, in a permanent sense, but I understand that the truth is self-evident, and that means the life of men is in you just as well as it's in me. So I'm going to treat you with equality. I'm going to give you the same respect that I want, right? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, endowed with their Creator with certain unalienable rights. So I'll stop it right there, because man creates institutions, therefore man must be above the institutions he creates. So that's why it's written that way, because you have what he who creates controls. It's that simple. So if I go create something like a private membership association, or if I go create a trust or whatever, that's outside the state's perusal, where the state is a creature of statute, so they create corporations. Well, if you're licensed and registered with the state as a corporation, guess who owns it? They created it. It's their creation. So now it's a regulation thing, and this is where people get trapped outside the supreme law of the land. It's so everything starts, right? The supremacy clause of the United States state there's no law higher than the Constitution. And what do we mean by that? The limiting factor of everything in this United States of America is bound by what is written in the Constitution of the United States. There can be no state law that delegates from it, no statute written for creatures of the statute that abrogates the authority of the supremacy clause. And so we go with something, and many of your listeners, everyone has been affected by the COVID-19 deal. So we'll break this apart in just a few of the amendments written in the Constitution. So most people haven't read it, the annotated amendments. In COVID-19, what we had was a violation. Each and every one of us has had a constant barrage and violation of 5 of those amendments. And I'll start with the first one. So people believe they understand what the First Amendment means. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. So one of the big issues we have in our country today is a lack of knowledge about the English language and grammatical structure and how to comprehend what we read. Now, we can get off into another tangent on that about the intentional dumbing us down. Well, that's 100% true. But nonetheless, an establishment of religion identifies what? An establishment of religion. This means a business, or the free exercise thereof. That's why there's a comma there separating the two ideas. The free exercise thereof is a natural law principle, and that's freedom of conscience. And it's written that way in American jurisprudence as freedom of conscience. And that's the ability to think separately from anyone else, any organization, and have a belief that is yours. So it's freedom of conscience, right? The same is exact true if Tommy Tutu across the street believes that he wants to wear a mask and that the paper mache on his face is granting him some type of relief from stresses or whatever. I can't walk up to him and rip it off his face. Why? Because I would be trespassing his property. And then we're going to go into the Fourth Amendment. And the Fourth Amendment is the securement of life, liberty, and property, the exclusive use, enjoyment, and disposal thereof. And so property is identified. We have a huge issue with people understanding what property is. Property in American jurisprudence is also intellectual, copyright properties, but it also includes personal autonomy. That means self-determination. And, you know, one of the things we have in our current culture of unicorns and snowflakes, Chris, is that people want to give away the assumption of risk of life. You can't.
Mm-hmm.
We'll give away our liberties and freedoms for perceived safety. And this has been talked about since time immemorial. When you do that, you get neither. And you deserve
exactly.
neither.
Ben Franklin said that.
That's right. They're gonna take them both away. So the assumption of risk doctrine is a doctrine that's been in this country since its foundation. And that assumption of risk is when I step my foot outside my house, I've assumed the risk of life. Nobody else can accept that for me, right? If I want to walk around and I don't care what's going on, I don't care what virus they claim's going on. I really don't care. I understand from the foundation that I live on that the day that I'm going to die is already preordained, right? And I don't have any fear of death because death is the only tool used by manipulators to scare humans. We're the only ones with enough consciousness to actually fear death and be used. I can't take a gun to my dog, walk outside and say, by the way, if you don't stop pooing on my rug, I'm going to blow your brains out. The dog don't understand that, right? He don't get it. But you do that to a human, and guess what happens? Now because the fear of death controls their consciousness, they are controlled. This is why it's always by fear. It's always a manipulation by fear because it is the opposite of love, power, and a sound mind. So we'll move from number 4, and I will advise everybody that listens to this podcast, don't believe anything I say. Go verify everything I'm telling you. Read it. And if you don't understand it the first time, read it 6, 7 times. It's taken me 15 years of reading this stuff to get to this point. It really has. It's 15 long years of study. I've got all these books behind me and another shelf, 2 shelves over here. It looks like a law library now. And here. And I really don't even
common law library.
I don't even like reading all this stuff, but it's necessary because I know it's helping people. But if you have that foundation, though, that I'm talking about, this principle core that you won't move from, you'll see justice when it's happening, and you'll see wrong when it's happening, and then you'll stand in the truth and honor and integrity for justice. And that means justice is a huge deal. If anybody has older dictionaries and can do the etymology, you'll see that the watering down of language is another horrible thing also, because we've taken words and their figurative and literal meanings and just watered them down to just, where they have no meaning whatsoever. But either way.
Exactly.
So we'll go to the next amendment, which is Amendment 5, which is due process of law. Due process of law is the 5th Amendment of the United States, and the first 5 amendments of the United States deal with 7 or 8 deal with national, and that means federal deals. So it's there's a reason why due process is in there twice. It's in the 5th Amendment and in the 14th Amendment, and there's a separation thereof. Okay, so the 5th Amendment is a due process right that you can't lose life, liberty, or property without due process. So due process is described as a state interest so narrowly tailored that it actually, how do I want to say this? There has to be a state interest so narrowly tailored to actually destroy the evil that it is proposing to stop. Let's stop right there. And by the eminent domain clause of the 5th Amendment, that you must be justly compensated. That's a rule. That's a fact. It's written down. Now, when I or Tommy Tutu at CVS or Dollar General store walks out there and violates and trespasses your property and tells you have to don a medical device without medical license and says you have to do this, he's actually committed a criminal act. Now, he doesn't know that. He's just doing his job. We have insulated ourselves through ignorance and incompetence or wanton disregard, whichever one you want to choose. But nonetheless, we actually have built, through COVID, a Gestapo of sorts, where the people are policing themselves, and nobody's ever forced anybody to do anything.
Exactly. Isn't it ingenious?
It is totally ingenious because that removes the liability. Our governor here, and our attorney here, Jeff Landry, at the very beginning of COVID, it was weird because I remember when they had the interview, and I felt like I was in a time warp because, let me turn that off. What happened was, sorry about that. I thought I turned it off.
Oh, no problem.
I don't watch a whole lot of movies, but I had watched the Batman movie with Bane in it. And when Jeff Landry spoke up, and the governor sitting there, we don't have the authority to force y'all to do this. We give it back to you, the people, right? And I was like, what? Did I just hear him say this? And of course, I went and started tearing apart the proclamations of every state, and knowing the checks and balances of government, we had executive branches legislating law. Well, that's a violation of the checks and balances. But when you went and read every single one of the proclamations and mandates and everything else, they never really said anything. Like our states referred to Title 26 of the Louisiana statutes, which the only person subject to that code were military personnel. Well, he wrote it right there. He wrote it in it. But due to mass media, social media, and the propensity and speed in which misinformation and disinformation can flow now, the people accept that information ideologically aside one way or the other, and then impose their will on each other. And it is an ingenious device to have us commit crimes against each other. And here's the one thing I want to get across to people as we move forward. Systems can't commit crimes. They can't. Systems don't commit crimes. People do. And so when you get that foundational truth and understanding that we have a people problem, we have an education problem, and we have totally rejected knowledge at all fronts. Well, when your society is at such an age of decadence, it starts consuming itself. And that's where we're at. Well, we don't know what right is right, left is wrong. We don't know up is up, and we don't know down is down. And so, but to get back on point about the amendments, so you have due process, eminent domain clause, which is your due process, and that's the right to go into a court of law. And due process incorporates two ideas: substantive due process. So even law schools don't teach substantive due process anymore, and they haven't since Dr. Graves is 79 years old. He went to law school in the 70s, and they weren't teaching it then. So substantive due process is substantive rights, those principles like enumerated in the Bill of Rights, right? In the Bill of Rights, for example, I'll just go look at this real quick. I can't remember the exact wording. For imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us in many cases of the benefits of trial by jury, is written in your Declaration of Independence, right? So when you get to that point where you understand that when we succeeded from King George, there was overreaches. We didn't have trial by jury. We didn't have the ability to cross-examine. You were just guilty. And, one of those cool things is the cycles of Earth and of republics and democracies and everything else. It starts off with spiritual revival on principles, and it works its way all the way back down to despotism, right? And it's spiritual decay.
Yes, indeed.
And so we're back there again. So now you're having people like us and people like Alphonse and groups exploring out, and you're having a spiritual revival going back to principles. And what is being thrown away is the religiosity and institutionalized religion, because they're part and parcel of the problem. No doubt about it. because without them pushing fear and the end of days and the second come, all this other garbage that isn't even biblical in nature, but was created to establish religions that make money, it's you can see the chains breaking. Like I said, I've been at it 15 years. I could see it 15 years ago. And it wasn't just about 9/11. A lot of people did a lot of research on 9/11, but I broke off and was like, no, there's something else here. I've never liked theories. If I can't substantiate my research, I don't like it. So with this particular avenue of ideas, you can substantiate it. And that's how the world of what I'll call Caesar exists. All authority must be written and expressed. There has to be a foundation of their system for them to neglect your rights or deprive your rights. And so we have a wonderful system of American jurisprudence here. It's just being ignored. So you get to the Fifth Amendment. You have due process. You can't just lose your property rights, and that's your personal autonomy. You can't just lose your freedom of conscience. You just don't lose these things. It has to be done in a strict way, and then you're justly compensated for it. And I'll give you a case of one of the controlling precedent case laws. Man lived in a subdivision. Subdivision kept flooding. There was 3 homes in the middle of that subdivision that they took, and they built a retention pond, right? They built a retention pond. Those 3 homes were justly compensated, but it saved 7 other 100 people's homes. That's how eminent domain works. When they come through and they're actually building access, infrastructure, or something of that, you get paid for it. You don't just lose it. So then we'll go to the 14th Amendment, which is your equal protection clause. And this is back to the idea of equality. And I'll explain this one very quickly because it incorporates due process too. So the Supremacy Clause of the United States reads thus. And I'll read this real quick. And this is out of American jurisprudence. I wish I could share the screen. But folks, if you've never picked up, gone to a law library, sat down and broke out the constitutional law section of American jurisprudence, I would greatly advise you to do so. They're very expensive books. Somehow Thomas Reuters has bought the copyright of them. Go figure. Just think of that.
Go figure, yes.
You go figure, okay? But you can go to a local law library, and I did. I went and took pictures. The Constitution of the United States and any amendments thereto, together with laws made in pursuance thereof, and treaties made under the authority of the United States, are expressly declared to be the supreme law of the land in the Constitution itself. The Constitution as the supreme law is without qualification and is absolute. And the powers actually granted constitute the paramount authority of the land. The federal Constitution is binding on all officers and departments of both the federal and state governments, including every court, whether it derives its authority from a state or from the United States. And here's the next part. This idea that I expressed a little while ago about the creatures of statute, incorporated under as U.S. trade and business, all these ideas that they have the right and authority to regulate commerce. Now, we've all been assumed to be operating trade or business and everything else, but that's what happens when your limited government expands to the point where it's the number one employer. You have to feed that machine. So you have to find ways to feed the machine, and that was never the intention of our system. It was never to be our mommy, our daddy, our hospital. It was never intended to be that way. Neither a statute nor a treaty can override the Constitution. State laws that run contrary to constitutionally protected rights of individuals cannot be allowed to stand and are without effect. Now, if you know that, and you know that state law that deprives you of federally secured rights, if you know that, like the 2 ladies, did y'all hear about the 2 ladies Tuesday who got the CDC mask mandate overturned?
No.
Okay. Well, as of Tuesday, the mask mandate for airlines and everything else is done. United States District Court in Florida, judge ruled that all the mandates were unconstitutional. COVID's done. It is officially done in the United States, and unfortunately, many of the courts shut us out for 2 years, and now we're finally getting heard. But it took 2 years, and that's why I want to teach people this method, because at this point in time, we still have good people in high places, as evidenced by Tuesday by 2 pro se women. And I say that because they're part of the Wyoming Freedom Organization. They made the court case, got injunctive relief, took them a year and a half to get it heard, and they don't have lawyers because lawyers don't know
Wow,
this.
that's great. Yeah, of course.
Lawyers don't know that. Now, make no mistake, what you're going to see, and remember you heard this from me, now that it's coming to an end, and the lawyers see the money on the other side, they'll start suing companies.
Yep,
They wouldn't
exactly.
stand in the middle of it because the Bar Association was told to stand down. There's no doubt that's why the Bar Association has caused more problems for the rest of us. But either way, let's continue on. No state law or public policy of a state can be allowed to override the positive guarantees of the federal Constitution. Let's read that one again. No state law or public policy of a state can be allowed to override the positive guarantees of the federal Constitution. Thus, the Constitution of the United States will trump state rules. Now, that's a beautiful thing. Now, what if all us freedom fighters and truth lovers actually knew that it was written that way? You actually had a supremacy clause, the language to equivocate it properly, and how to write it. Well, now, if I want to take a society and I want to set one group of people above everyone else, I compartmentalize information, right?
Exactly.
And that's exactly what's been done to us. We keep doctors in little boxes, right? We keep lawyers in little boxes, and make no mistake, the greatest insulating tool is ignorance. The lawyers don't know, so how can they possibly fight for truth when they're not even taught in law school?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so we have the 14th Amendment, and the one other one I forgot is the 13th Amendment, which is involuntary servitude is outlawed. Okay. Well, if involuntary servitude is outlawed, then how come I've lost personal autonomy, freedom of conscience, and due process? Again, so these ideas have been with us for a long time, but we'll see today. So I don't send my children to public school. I homeschool them. I had an older child that I did, and I saw and look, I love my daughter. She's a nurse now. She's a nurse, finished college and everything else, but she really doesn't know anything. She wasn't taught anything.
Yeah, of course.
It's the Common Core and everything that I tried to teach. Well, the children go to school and they tell them that the parents are dumb. The parents are idiot. Why would you listen to authority, right? And it snapped me out of reality. So if not me, who? If not now, when? I'll take control of my 2 boys and teach them a different way. I'll teach them. We learn Latin together. We do all these things to build a foundation of strong intellectual ability. Now, whether what they do with it or not, that's their choice as they grow older, but they've got the opportunity. If you never turn the light on intellectually, though, or challenge them intellectually, the light never comes on. And then you can't even think through these ideas. And so we have the breaking of each and every one of you in this United States who went through emotional trauma, right? Psychological trauma, right? All had real criminal things done to you. That's it. And so there's only one way to make corporations and people recognize anything, and that's consequences. and unfortunately, that's just the truth. There must be repercussions and consequences for our actions. So the man on his principles, built on that rock foundation, and understands that I can't go rip the guy's mask off, even though I think he's kind of ignorant, because he didn't even read the package insert, which stated unequivocally that it protected no one. You know, I still can't. He's got the freedom of conscience, the freedom to do with his property as he wants. So I can't do that. Now, the equal and opposite is true too. He can't trespass my property. But when they do, and they do it under the guise of policy and things of that nature, now you have what's called a cause of action. And a cause of action has essential elements. And so each element must be pled correctly inside. And while we're there, I'll stop too. Do y'all want to ask any questions before we move forward? It's been me talking.
You covered so much. Well, I mean, just to make it easy as far as the law aspect is concerned, most of the dealings that we have with the judicial system and law itself is really contractual, right?
Well, sometimes so. Sometimes so, because contracts are private agreements, okay? And private agreements can't be jumped in. Congress shall pass no law restricting the obligations of contracts. And why is that? Because mine and your contract that we agreed to is completely private until there's what? A breach of contract. So you have different levels of courts in the United States. And you have what are called actual courts. Actual courts, that would be your federal district court, your state superior court, and things of that nature. And then you have what are called administrative courts. So an administrative court is not judiciary. It is not judiciary at all. People go to these kangaroo courts and go in there trying to do a judicial process and stand up for their substantive rights, and they're not going to hear them. Well, one, you have a judge impersonating a judge. He's not really a judge. He's an administrative officer. And these are in tax courts and in what's called municipal courts. A municipality is the lowest form of government made. And that's equivocated. I went over it last night in the show with Alphonse, what a municipality is. It is the actual lowest form of government. It's it. That's all it is. So when you get a traffic citation or things of that nature, and you walk into that kangaroo court and you try a judicial process and you get railroaded, you go, oh my God, all the courts are bad. It's because that's human nature. The human nature is of thinking the absolute. But yet, just like the two women pro se people in Florida, they did it right because they followed the rules of procedure. They followed the Constitution, and they went to the correct venue, right? So if it's never taught to you, if you never know how to invoke a liberty, if you don't know what a right is, there's no possible way you can express it. It's impossible.
Absolutely.
You cannot do it.
That's why this education is so important, because, I mean, I, for one, was totally ignorant of all this stuff. And it really is compelling and fascinating to find that there's this whole sublayer. The very foundations of law look totally different than what we see on some stupid law show or something like that, or what we see play out in the courts in the public. You know, it's amazing. It's really, really, but also as far as the world of contracts are concerned, there's different kinds of contracts. There's express and implied, right? And implied is where they get you a lot, especially in this mask mandate bullshit, right?
Well, yeah. Well, the implied contract has no standing anyway. So for a contract to exist and for a duty and an obligation to exist, there must be a meeting of the minds. Okay? Without a meeting of the minds or some form of consideration, which consideration doesn't have to be monetary value, it just has to be some type of value whatsoever to bind the contract together. There must be somebody that incurs some type of injury or damage, okay? And then an agreement. So an implied contracts, they just don't work. Now, many, when challenged, okay, let's enter that caveat. So, when you walk into a private grocery store, okay, let's bring that up, okay, and they'll go, "This is private property." No, it's not. It's open to the public, okay. And I'll give you a little caveat here that we can thank someone very Miss Rosa Parks for this law. And this law is under Title II of the 1964 Act, that you're immunized from state or federal criminal charges when you stay in a place of public accommodation without violence. You just sit there. You say, I got every right to be here. Well, guess who you have to thank? Rosa Parks. So a place of public accommodation is defined as a restaurant, movie theater, hospital, all these places. If Johnny Tutu from the public can walk in there, and so can somebody else. And listen, remember I talked about that cyclical thing? And what's really funny about the signs, well, you see the signs. This went down 50 years ago, just in a different way. White only pie, okay. It's cyclical. It's cyclical. And because of our ignorance, we don't understand there's already case law and precedent for the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. Only the segregation is for a different reason now.
Right. It doesn't matter, but we are. We're back at the same hyper-polarized event using, and so one of the things that I started looking at when I started reading the case law from the 1960s, I started going, hold on, this was a hyper-sensationalized event too. So I started going to watch old videos. All the governors in different states were doing the same thing that they were doing this time, doing these big showboating and grandstanding events that hyper-sensationalized the people. And the people went out. It wasn't that bad. It really wasn't a big thing, but then it became a big thing because the media expressed the idea all across the nation. And just like they did with COVID, right? Without the media,
Absolutely.
would COVID ever existed? No.
Yeah, exactly. Do the Amish know about? I mean,
no, they don't.
Unless they went into town, would they know that COVID was happening?
Well,
absolutely not.
Well, one of the best interviews I saw. I don't watch TV anymore, and people send me so much stuff. But I did watch this one thing some lady sent me about an Amish interview, and I want to say it was Pennsylvania, somewhere in that area. And the news reporter asked the Amish man. She goes, why hasn't COVID hit your community at all? There's 0% COVID numbers in the Amish community. And he looks up at her with a beer. We don't have a TV.
That's perfect. That is perfect.
And what was the real virus, though? And that's something, a psychological idea that you can go back and say, they actually told us we were the virus, right? Segregate yourselves. And do things of that nature, which goes against the entire human nature, which is to be social people.
Yes.
Right. And that's why I say even those who aren't aware, like the man that might want to wear his mask and get his 10 vaccines and everything else, scared to death that he's going to live, I still know that I'm fighting for his rights even when he's unaware of them, because he's been so psychologically traumatized that he's going to get these 15 boosters thinking it's helping him. And that's called psychological trauma and negligent infliction of emotional stress. And these are real causes of action. As a matter of fact, they're in my pleading. It altered my life, and it altered my life in a way that's turned out to be good, because you can take every bad thing that happens to you and turn it towards the good, but you have to focus the energy towards solutions and not the problem. And that's when you become a doer, right? And that goes back to the foundation principles. So we can talk about the problem all day long, but then you're just focused on the problem and you're not part of the solution. But when you start talking about solutions, then you move your mountain, your inner mountain, your spiritual mountain, from one of destructive thought to construction. And so now you're creating, and instead of destroying. And it doesn't matter in this world of duality, you're either one or the other. You really are. And you're going to have to choose this day whom you will serve. Will you serve the adverse, which is the darkness, or God, which is light? And when I speak on those terms, I'm speaking from a philosophical idea. I'm speaking from the principles. You can't not deny these truths. They're there. And now the allegorical representations in spiritual books Some people just don't get them. And again, that's because of reading comprehension and the inability. What's funny, people will take spiritual text and read them by the letter. They'll take law, which requires you to read it by the letter, and insert philosophical tenets.
Exactly. It's interesting you point that out.
So how did you, Brandon, how did you start on this path?
I walked outside 15, maybe even 16 years. How old am I now? 42. So I was 26. Yeah, I was 26, 27 years old. I lived a rough life. I never went to church or anything like that. I was a bad boy. But then I turned it back around, and I was living through mammon, and I was strapped with debt like every American. And I walked outside one day, and I was agnostic at best, atheist, somewhere in between there, And I walked outside, and I said, "Man, there's just something wrong with this world. I can't pinpoint it." But I looked up, and I just said to myself, I said, "Man, if you'll show me the truth, I'll follow it." And I had no idea who I was talking to, or what I was talking to, or what I meant by what I said. I just asked, "I want to know the truth." Oh, goodness gracious, was that a ride? It started. And so I started digging into things, right? And everybody goes through this natural progression of the awakening process, right? It's step by step. You go through your crazy step. You keep progressing until you come to a sound mind. And once you get to the sound mind stage, and I've been here probably 7 years now, maybe 8, it's solution based. It's not problem based anymore. It's looking for. And so one of the things when you're on solutions, you're going to find it. And what I mean by that, there's no way any system of men can write on paper to criminalize good, moral, and ethical behavior. They can't do it. You just can't do it. They can try all they want. They can make us look like bad people, color us like bad people, because we're actually standing for freedoms and liberties. But at the end of the day, just like there's a plethora of people in my Telegram group who have been arrested for no mask wearing. 4 of those 7 people have had, I think it's 4, maybe 5, have had their cases thrown out because of what we're teaching. And now they have a surefire lawsuit. And why is that? Because the moment they arrested them, they deprived them of their rights due to color of law. This is Title 42, 1983. All these ideas, they violated their personal autonomy without lawful authority. There's no state, there's absolutely no law written anywhere that indicates that you had to wear a mask. Not one state. Not one state. They can't write it. That's why they use the CDC, which it's not even a government organization.
Exactly. It's a for-profit organization.
That's right. That's right. It is a for-profit organization. It is just an advisory place. That's it. It's advice. Yeah.
That should. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead with your thought.
Well, I was just going to say that should have been a red flag right there. There should be a conflict of interest right there if they're suggesting something, the very agenda that they're sponsoring in many ways.
Well, and that's the beauty of reading actual court cases. I'll read this one to you. I want to read this one to you. So on February 19th, I told people that COVID was over, and that's Saldana versus Glenhaven. And I'll read this. And so people, just so you know, I have my own subscription to Westlaw. I'll pay for this for a reason. That's so I can go research the case law. I have American jurisprudence. I have corpus juris secundum. And I have all the synopsis of everything that every attorney and judge in the United States has. Well, there's a reason why I did that. I teach it. I better know it, right? And so
for sure,
I don't like teaching false truths or half truths. Don't believe any snippet from any internet guru who states that this court case said this. You got to go read it yourself, because what I have found over my years and making many mistakes is finding some internet guru who posted a snippet from a case law. And guess what? When I go read that case law today, it's not there. It's a falsification to back up whatever their delusion is. It's a plethora of them. But anyway, I want to read this, Saldina versus Glen Haven. And so this was adjudicated by the 9th District Court of the United States Courts of Appeals. And what the Glen Haven nursing home was trying to do was hide behind the federal officer statute using the CDC's guidelines. Okay? Trying to use the CMS guideline. They were trying to hide behind the federal officer statute and not get sued. Okay? And so what happened was the judge in this case actually said this. The relationship between a federal officer or agency and a person or entity acting under the officer or agency typically involves subjection, guidance, or control. But simply complying with a law or regulation is not enough to bring a private person within the scope of the statute. A private firm's compliance or non-compliance with federal laws, rules, and regulations does not by itself fall within the scope of the statutory phrase acting under a federal official. And that is so even if the regulation is highly detailed and even if the private firm's activities are highly supervised and monitored. And Glen Haven goes on and on to argue many different things. And this is the judge's reply about how the CDC. So remember this. It is our duty, now that the courts are back open, we forced them back open, to actually go make each and every one pay. Okay? And each corporation pay. Because guess what's going to happen for the next 10, 15 years while this generation is here? They're going to know that they violated. And they have to know. It's our duty. It's our duty to do it. But anyway, so they try to hide behind it. And then this is what the judge says. Glen Haven relies on nothing more than regulations and recommendations for nursing homes, covering topics such as COVID-19 testing, use and distribution of personal protective equipment, and best practice to reduce transmission within congregate living environments. For example, one CMS memo identifies what healthcare staff should do in response to the pandemic. And it states what CMS expects, encourages, advises, and recommends. Similarly, a CDC communication cited by Glen Haven identifies recommendations and steps that healthcare centers should take. Another memorandum published by the California Department of Public Health states that the agency ensures compliance with state licensing laws and federal certification regulations on behalf of CMS. Without more than government regulations and recommendations, Glen Haven has failed to establish that it was acting under a federal official, and it has not identified a duty of the federal government that it performed. So let's break that down real quick. Language is this beautiful tool, right? And because of people's perception of something, and their cognitive dissonance of something, they don't really take the time to actually read anything. They'll see the snippets on TV, but if you go back and read every single one of the CDC documents, if you go back and read every single one of the CMS documents, or if you ever went back and read your state governor's proclamation, you would find out that they all said nothing. None of them. It was just mere suggestions, recommendations, and everything else. And so they set out on February 20, whatever it was, February 19th. I pulled it down now. I knew from that point on it was over. And of course, we had Tuesday, the court case in the district court in Florida, where they told the CDC that all of their mandates were unconstitutional. So the airlines are now free too. And so everybody who went to an airline and was subjected to tyrannical enforcement now has a lawsuit if they so choose. But it's going to take about 1% of us doing what I'm doing to make an effective a change. It's what it's going to take. and it's not complicated. The biggest hurdle I find for everybody is unlearning the bull crap that you've put in. That is the hardest hurdle, because we all went through the stage where all government is bad, all people in high positions are bad. It's all a big conspiracy. It's really not that a conspiracy. There's good people in good places. There's good people in high places. There's bad people in high places. That's reality. You're going to have that. The truth is, what you're going to find as you start dealing with these people directly, like when I do my records request, or I walk up to the city hall, or I go to the courthouse, what you're going to find in your day-to-day interactions with these people is that they are incompetent, they are ignorant, and they just don't know.
Yeah.
It's interesting because you say 1%, Brandon, and that's only 33,000 Americans.
That's right. That's all it's going to take. You figure right now, in our groups, there's probably 60, 70,000 in our total in our groups. And there's out of that 60 to 70,000 that I'm aware of that are pushing actual cases. And yet the change is still happening, right? So in my experience, when light steps into darkness can't overcome that light. And it'll be your experience too, right? All the idiots in the world can't make me move. They can't. They can do all their jabberjawing and everything else, but I'm not moving. I've got my rock. I've got my foundation, and I'm going to stand. So virtue and vice aren't arbitrary things. And again, good moral, ethical behavior and natural law precedents, which is what this system's built on. It really is. I sent you the fundamental principles document. It's written all over American jurisprudence. It's written in your Declaration of Independence, these what we call substantive rights. These rights that are invisible, they're invisible, but they're rights nonetheless. Your right to own property, your right to work, all these ideas. And so later they come in and they start writing about it. And that's where your codes and statutory law comes in. But nonetheless, 1% of us, and if you get up to 5 or 6%, what's going to happen is a snowball effect. And it will. It's taken this long just to get 1%. But that 1% is now going to affect, it's the 100th monkey effect. I think that's what they call it, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So there's enough people getting interested, seeing so now at the beginning of COVID, when COVID first started, and they told me that the borders were locked down. I live in Louisiana, by the way. And, everybody that I actually associated with then went to screaming, it's the end of the world. It's here. It's finally here. I said, no way. I took a 12-state tour. Video recorded me going across every state border. And when I was asked I did get to Texas-Louisiana border, and they made everybody get off on the rest area. And that military kid come walking up to me, 18 years old, asking me questions. I said, who gave you the right to ask me any personal questions? Sarge. Sarge walked up. I said, who gave you the right to ask me any questions? Right? Has there been a crime committed? Y'all got an arrest warrant? Y'all got an affidavit of probable cause? Do y'all have any of these things to arrest my freedom? Oh, sir, no. This is a voluntary form. Go ahead. Okay? But if you saw it on TV, it looked like the borders were war zones.
Yeah, exactly.
And the intent there is to test compliance.
Right. It is. That's what it is. It is exactly that. So, and one of our biggest issues, when I say biggest issues, but it's just an issue, is the real-time data manipulation, right? So they know how far they can push it. And when I say they, it's going to be a select few that operate news media. It's going to be a very select few. But at the same time, all your little puppets and politicians everywhere are just doing the whim of a very few.
Yep.
But we're so doggone cowardly today. That's like the U.S. Marshals Tuesday stopped me from entering stopped us from entering in the federal district court there in Baton Rouge for a vaccine passport. And I identified while I was there. I said, "Hold up, guys!" And later the day that I read that court case, I had to get all their names, call the United States Marshal, file a complaint, and now I'm going to file a lawsuit against them. They had no right to ask me my privacy. I have a right to privacy here in the state of Louisiana. You have a right to privacy. Anybody asking you to identify your medical history is violating a HIPAA law.
Yes.
Exactly.
These laws are in place to protect us, and yet they're violating them openly, which is criminal behavior. So again, now with these U.S. Marshals, what's going to have to happen is I'm going to write a state criminal complaint. You can write a state criminal complaint. That's right. And I've got video evidence of them violating my constitutionally secured rights. Well,
This is why they called it a state of emergency, because
Well,
they said that supersedes HIPAA violation, and it also supersedes the Americans with Disabilities Act.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because what we'll do is we'll read this. We'll read this right here. Effective emergency. This is out of I read to you the supremacy of the United States Constitution and amendments thereto. Effective emergency. An emergency, while it cannot create power, increase granted power, or remove or diminish the restrictions imposed upon the power granted or reserved, may allow the exercise of power already in existence, but not exercised except during an emergency. The danger must be immediate and impending, or the necessity urgent for the public service, such as will not admit delay, and where the action of the civil authority would be too late in providing the means which the occasion calls. For instance, there is no basis in the Constitution for the seizure of steel mills during a wartime labor dispute, despite the president's claim that the war effort would be crippled if the mills were shut down. The Supreme Court has not denied the reality of dangers from foreign or internal conflicts. Rather, it has recognized the need to respect constitutional requirements, even in troubled times. So
Damn.
they can say one thing, but it's written totally different.
Exactly.
You see, you can't trust any of these opinions. And this is becoming the diligent seeker. No extra authority is granted, and this is written into the Constitution. It's written into American jurisprudence. It's backed up by case law. They get no extra power. The only way, they must strictly tailor that state interest in such a way that it actually destroys the evil in which it proposes to save you from. Okay? It has to destroy it. It has to actually eliminate the evil. It can't bring more evil to fight evil. You get what I'm saying? That's not how it's written. They must actually destroy it. And so after 2 weeks, right, and with bell curve and that, they never had any right to even start the 2 weeks. They never had any right or authority. But what they did do through fear and through manipulation caused everybody to not be able to go to the courts. And make no mistake about that. That was the reason why it lasted so long. But once we got back in the courts, they had to rule by law. They can't rule outside of it. Now, if they go start ruling outside of it, guess what they've done? They've actually stepped outside their absolute immunity. They're treasonous. And now the federal judges who are appointed for life on gravy jobs making $280,000 a year have just lost their lifetime job.
So what do you mean when they were when we couldn't get into courts for 2 years, merely physically because of COVID regulations or for some other reason?
Well, like the whole government was shut down for a long period of time. You couldn't even.
Yeah. Okay.
They wanted to do Zoom meetings. The Zoom meeting itself is a violation of your right to due process. You got to be able to face your accuser inside a court of law, cross-examine them. Well, I don't know what's going on the outside of your screen right there. If somebody's helping you say what needs to be said, holding up signs to teach you what to say, I don't know all that. It's a complete violation of my due process rights. It's in total violation. That's why I don't know if you're digitally manipulating the screen. I know I caught one judge. She was behind the green screen. I called her out. I said, "You're behind the green screen. You're not even in the courtroom." It flickered just a little bit. She moved past the flag, and the flag flickered. So I object. Your Honor, you're not even in a courtroom. Are you sitting in your house?
Oh my God.
I'm just saying. So you start calling them out on all this stuff. And what happens and this was at the very beginning of COVID. That's why it took so long. It's taken me 2 years to dial in correctly. I filed the first suit October of 2020. Yeah, it's 2022. I filed the first suit in October of 2020. Went in there and did the Zoom meetings, did all that stuff, and wasn't ready to actually push a case all the way through. I called out, I objected to everything within there, and then I had to stop what I was doing, go back to researching, get better, fine tune my skills, right, and then go back. And at that point in time, what they kept doing, and I mean because they were just following the guidelines, right? They were just operating outside their authority through administrative policy. And when they do that, and you start filing criminal complaints, judicial complaints, and bar grievances, what happens is all of a sudden they start going, okay, the monkeys figured it out.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
He saw through the bluff.
Now, when you start making people pay, you make judges pay, you raise the insurance rates up, you make law firms pay, you start making people pay, and then all of a sudden, the rule of law is back. So it's very important as we move forward that people understand this, that the effective emergency never created any more power on these people. It never did. It couldn't. That would mean it would supersede the supremacy clause of the United States Constitution, which is the supreme law of the land. So that means you have a right to life, liberty, and property, freedom of conscience, due process of law. I meant to explain this earlier too. The 14th Amendment is your equal protection clause while I'm thinking about it. And that means you, Chris, and you, Hunter, wherever you live, you get up and you decide to go on vacation. You decide to go travel the 48 states. Well, guess what? While you're traveling those 48 states and you go into Mississippi, you've got the equal protection of the federal Constitution. You get the same rights that you had in New Jersey that you have in Mississippi. It is the equal protection clause. So there's never, anywhere you go, doesn't matter. No state can create some statutory code that restricts your freedoms because it's null and void. And so that's the importance of understanding due process.
And that seems as good a place as any to end the first free hour. If you would like to hear the second hour along with Hunter and I's commentary, you can go to patreon.com/themeltpodcast, where for as little as $3 a month, you can get access to full episodes, exclusive episodes, and early episodes, along with earning merch for having subscribed for 3 months, and the merch depends on what level you're subscribing to. So there's all that. And if you want merch without the Patreon trappings, just go to the link in the episode notes. In the second hour, we discuss malfeasance, political tribalism, statism, mass hysteria, and the question of whether there should be any compromise in matters of sovereignty, along with much, much more. It's a fantastic and highly informative conversation. I recommend listening to the full version. I thank you all so much for listening. It's very, very much appreciated. And until next time, take care, folks. If you've liked what you've heard and would like to contribute to The Melt, there are a few ways that you can do that. The most tangible would be financially. Just click the Patreon link in the episode notes, and there you will find ways that you can contribute for as little as $3 a month. This will give you access to bonus episodes, early access to regular episodes, and you can also participate in monthly Zoom meetups. Contributing financially will also help make The Melt better, pay the bills, and help to make this podcast a full-time endeavor that I can fully devote my time to and provide you with more content. Another way of contributing would be to go to wherever it is that you subscribe to The Melt and give it a favorable review or rating, and this will help it to reach more people. You can also spread the word to friends and family via social media, email, or word of mouth. And lastly, if none of those options are readily available or appealing to you, simply send your positive thoughts and intentions. In an interconnected and quantumly entangled multiverse, these also go a long way. Thank you.